evening and welcome to ELOSOFUMARTAKES. This is our 286th take, live from the Alec Bradley Lone Star studio of Azle, Texas. I'm your host, Ferio Tego, as always, and I'm so proud, so pleased, and so privileged to be with you all tonight. This is going to be a fantastic show, an annual tradition that is a little bit sooner than we've all expected, but we knew this was coming for some time. The PCA Trade Show of 2024 is now complete. Yes, it is spring, but it is complete. We plan on recapping it with one of our absolute favorite people here on this show in just a few moments. But before we get to formal introductions of our guest of honor, we do have to thank the people that make this show possible. And tonight's show is sponsored by Drew Estate. Drew Estate is back and better than ever with the latest and greatest from the Blackened brand. Yes, the Blackened Shade to Black S84 Shade to Black by Drew Estate is now available to all retailers nationwide. Yes, following the resounding success of Drew Estate's partnership with Blackened Whiskey on Blackened Cigars M81 Maduro to the core in 2022, Drew Estate announced the new Connecticut Shade Wrap brand release and shipped Blackened SA84 Shade to Black just about a week before the trade show and featured it at the PCA 2024 show. The cigars are a passion project between Rob Dietrich, the master distiller and blender of Blackened whiskey from Sweet Amber Distilling, James Hetfield, Metallica co-founder, singer, guitarist, and Jonathan Drew, founder and president of Drew Estate. Hetfield and Dietrich worked closely with Drew, a friend of Dietrich's, for over a decade to create the perfect blend for the cigar. The Blackened S84 Shade of Black takes aficionados on a nuanced journey with its deliciously smooth and inviting blend. Wrapped in a luxurious Connecticut Ecuadorian cover leaf, the consumer experiences of this expression is distinctly different from the original, of course, while still retaining foundational qualities of M81. Due to the Connecticut River Valley broadleaf Maduro binder and Nicaraguan Maduro and Pennsylvania broadleaf Maduro filler leaves. James Hetfield of Metallica shares his excitement, stating, "Shade to Black is more than just a cigar for us. It's a celebration, a passion, and a tribute to the craftsmanship who strives for excellence in their lives." So check out your Drew Diplomat retailer today, or any Drew Diplomat retailer, for Blackened Shade to Black S84. And welcome, everybody. This is our 286th take. Tonight's audio is, of course, brought to you by Gran Habano Cigars. If you are listening to us on podcasts, wherever you listen to podcasts, whether that be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Podbean, or even iHeartRadio, you're listening to us courtesy of Gran Habano Cigars. Honest, compassionate, great cigars. Be sure to download, subscribe, and review today. And if you already are a subscriber, be sure to unsubscribe, but yet hit the subscribe button again. That really helps my numbers and helps me allow me to get great guests like I'm about to introduce. So without further ado, tonight's 286th take guest is sponsored by United Cigars. Smoke one today and start living united. Mr. Michael Herklots of Ferio Tego. Michael,
what's happening?
How you doing, sir?
Doing great, man. Here we go again. Another trade show, another recap, another fine Sunday evening spent together.
It is delightful as always, Michael. Thank you so much for making the time. I know the week obviously ended on the cusp of Easter, and that was a really nice opportunity for us to spend some time with family last Sunday. But we're back better than ever, I guess, as we can say.
Better than ever
for our 286th take, and thank you so much for agreeing to continue this traditional live of being my first guest post trade show. So thank you so much.
I'm really glad it worked out. I'm glad we get to do it. My pleasure.
So this time you're not in Buffalo. You're not sick, but it's
And actually last time I think I made it healthy in the summer show.
Yeah.
We actually smoked a cigar together for like the first time ever in 5 years, because typically I am always sick or late or traveling or something.
That's good.
Yeah, we're gonna do it. But speaking of, I'm not smoking yet, and
let's dive into that right away. So I have two cigars for you to choose. Some, of course, which has become a tradition here on ELOSOFUMARTAKES, is I allow my guests to choose. Now I usually give like 3 or 4 choices, but I have a point to go with these two cigars tonight. From your 2021 vintages, I have your acclaimed Ferio Tego Elegancia and Generoso.
Awesome.
So which would you like me to smoke tonight?
Oh, man. I've smoked them both recently. The Elegancia is just fabulous. But I think the Generoso has more obvious development from where it was. The Elegancia still sits in that real creamy, fatty, smooth deliciousness. which if you're in the mood for that, hey, go for it. But the arc has begun in the aging curve of Generoso, and it's really softened a bit of that upfront pepper that it had when it was new. So that's a tough call, bro. I don't know. I
Well,
don't know.
it
Maybe
sounded like you were going to go Generoso, but then you kind of talked yourself out of it with the Elegant, and
well
then you
then
kind of talked.
as I'm thinking about Elegancia, it just sounds so good. I brought an Elegancia thinking I was in the mood to smoke an Elegancia tonight. Um, but now it's got me thinking Generoso too. That's a tough. I think you're more of a Generoso guy. I mean, you like spicy, denser, bigger, bolder stuff.
Yep. Yeah.
So do that. Do Generoso.
All right. Sounds good. Yeah. I'm. That's always been kind of the one that I've leaned towards the most. I think they're both excellent. The first release that you did, I was absolutely um the first release of it, I was definitely a Generoso guy. And the additional vintages, I've kind of they've both kind of fallen into my pocket, but I've always enjoyed the Generoso blend. I think it's really good. So I'm really excited about this one. 2021s, man, that's exciting. This is exciting. I've been saving these for you, so I wanted to share this with you. So this is
I'm
exciting.
pumped. I'm gonna do an Elegancia. What the hell?
Right. Um, so I've noticed that I've actually had more conversations lately. It seems like in the last year where I have to say that myself too. Like I've found that while I used to be very exclusively a mild smoker in the mornings, typically with coffee and stuff, I've started to smoke a little bit bolder in the mornings with coffee, and I find that that's been pretty great for my palate personally. But then I've found that a lot of people that I've been talking to have been kind of, it's not so much a hot take when you hear it multiple times, but a lot of people have been kind of like floating that way. Um, I mean, do you feel like this is a cigar that you can enjoy any time of day, or when do you prefer to smoke Generoso the most?
Um, I so I typically do enjoy denser, bolder, richer flavors earlier, and then I tend to go more towards creamier, rounder, smoother stuff later. Um, so now with Generoso though, it does have a bit of strength, and I don't love to feel cigars necessarily early. Like I'm generally not a breakfast guy, so to have a very hearty cigar on an empty stomach first thing can sometimes really like blow up my day. So my favorite time for a cigar like that would be post lunch.
Oh, that's fair. Yeah, I the first time I actually smoked a cigar, funnily enough, was and it's the way to say it's funnily enough is it's very ironic. My older sister happens to be in town with her husband, and it was the night before her wedding. I think I mentioned this last time. It was the night before her wedding that I smoked the Generosa for the first time.
Oh, that's
So
awesome.
right after the wedding anniversary dinner. So it's kind of ironic. She's in town. She's staying with me. So um, so I think it's apropos that I'm lighting up a Generoso tonight. So that's good.
I love it.
So
And I just lit up the 2023 Elegancia, which released in October, so it's still the current release.
right, is 2024 slated for October as well, or is it going to change any timetables because of the calendars and stuff?
It's in aging. Boxes, the humidors are being finished now, so they'll be ready when we want to release them. I mean, I like the idea of really pushing the age, um, however much we can. I think it's such an important part of this project. I really don't feel that strongly that the year has to be the year of release. If we release 24s in 25 or we release 27s in 28 one day, I mean, kind of following that wine model that really is the ethos of what we're trying to do is find that balance of market demand and inventory, but also really put some extra time on these cigars to let them settle into themselves. But as it stands right now, fall-ish for the 24s.
Nice. I just did my first retro hail with this 2021, man, and it is still got some glorious, glorious flavor to it. I mean, and it's almost stouter than I recall the
To me,
2021.
it's gotten the effervescence of the spice has been tempered a little, and so it feels denser to me. The body and the overall sort of mouthfeel and texture of it feels a bit denser and richer because the spice is not as bright as it was when it was new.
Yeah, I could see that definitely. So we talked about this before the show. What are we drinking tonight? I'm going to share a drink with you. I've got some coffee right now, but I'm
Lovely.
going to be drinking something else as well.
I've got a little rye and a little bourbon, and I'm doing the rye first. Um, but it's these guys, Pinhook, which makes some awfully cool stuff.
Oh wow. Okay.
So this is the rye bourbon this year.
Pour some
I
rye as
forget who
well.
turned me on to it, but I think my cousins turned me on to it, but I really like it.
Is it a local to New York or what is it?
No, no, Kentucky.
Okay. Nice. I haven't heard of it. Never should try to find some. I've got some George Dickel aged 6 year rye, and then I'll move on to something from your state, Cooperstown Distillery. Yes, it's in the baseball, so
Oh, cool.
some bourbon here in just a little bit. So, but awesome. Okay. Well, it's funny. I already had a couple people comment that I suited up for you tonight, and we kind of had these exchanges over the years, Michael. Where one year I'll dress up one year, and you'll dress down, and then you'll dress normal, which is dress up, and I'll be dressed down and stuff. So a little nice little back and forth we have with
It was
that.
actually my intention to dress up more for this one, and then we got jammed up with a homework crisis, and then before you knew it, it was time to jump on. So
Oh no, no worries. I'm just glad you're here.
you get the Sunday
So
civvies.
yeah, I know it's also unplanned too, which is always the best part about it. It's just kind of random how what works and everything. But I kind of I had an opinion about this and it was really interesting. So are you familiar with the TV show Frasier
Sure, of course.
and then the reboot of it, the recent reboot of it?
I have not seen anything of the reboot.
So one of the nitpicks or commentaries about the reboot is that Frasier's style is a little bit more modern. Like he's not continuously in the trademark suits that he wore. He's actually even a few times he's actually even wearing jeans, and he's got kind of what we call like loafer dress sneakers, or I'm not sure the proper term. I'm sure you know about
Right,
it,
right.
but um, just more modern, fresh look, and been some complaints about that, and I read a random comment. I'm sure it was from nobody in particular, but it was like like sense of style evolves over time, and you can't expect um if Fraser's supposed to be a man of taste and a man of fashion, so why would he be wearing 1990s suits in the year 2024 and stuff?
Right.
But that got me thinking to to kind of the evolution of your style. There was over the years and everything, and which is it was it had a nice little modern flair to it in the early 2000s. We saw a recent picture from the 2006 trade show, which was nice. um and then obviously the full suits, which were always dapper and well, and I know you still rock those from occasion, but now you go more open collar, a little bit more casual. You even see you sometimes rocking a jean jacket and things like that. I mean, is that a pretty um I guess spot on analogy for even your own fashion taste? Like you've just kind of evolved as fashion has evolved as well, or
Um, yeah, there's some level of time and place. New York City in 2006 as a 26-year-old guy is very different than living in the burbs, working from home at 43, they're just different circumstances. So I'm sure if I was still working in the city every day, I'd be wearing a suit and tie every day. I'm certain of it. But it's just not my circumstances. The other thing is it's not just my style that's evolved, but it's everyone's style that continues to evolve. And um, while I do believe that um, while I do
Give
believe that
everyone a reference point. So for people listening later, I'm showing the picture of
there
Michael
you
from
go.
2006.
Um, you have to I have to make sure that I'm dressing in a way that's appropriate for my audience. And what I've learned is like 3 years ago, bro, I would have showed up in Dallas, Texas in a suit, shirt, and tie without exception. But what I've learned as I got older is even though I'm convinced that that is still appropriate, it can sometimes make other people uncomfortable when if I'm dressed so differently, particularly to a formal extent, it can be uncomfortable. And the last thing I want to do as a business owner is make anyone feel uncomfortable.
Mhm.
So that's why I do a tie less and less. But certainly when the opportunity is there to wear a tie, I'm rocking a tie 100%.
Yeah, I
And
think
then the third part is we got spoiled because no one got dressed in real clothes for a year up here anyway.
yeah.
So that was just a completely um different challenge too.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is kind of like in a way it's almost kind of come full circle from this photo here. To now, again, no tie and everything. But I mean, look, man, I mean, you still look dapper. You still got the pocket square. Is the pocket square like always been a thing of yours? I mean, it's kind of stood the test of time.
Yeah, I'd say, 2000 I always dressed um as a jazz musician, there's a certain
Hmm.
expectation of style too.
Yeah.
But definitely by the time I moved to New York and then I went to Italy, um, that was 2003. That was a game changer. That to me is when I really saw color different. I saw fit different. All those little details that I missed before suddenly became much more obvious. And yeah, so I would say since 2003, that's uh that's when I really started paying attention to, details like collars, cuffs, um, shoulder width, pocket square, all of that stuff that I think kind of defines my look now, regardless of whether it's the stripes and paisleys and polka dots of 2006 or whether it's, navy, white, and gray of 2024.
Yeah, I remember our first conversation. We talked about your kind of journey through style and everything, and you talked about how it was around that time where you started paying attention to like the details and the nuance and stuff. Like most people, like myself, for instance, you buy a jacket, you just make sure it looks nice and doesn't look like it's drowning you, but it also doesn't look like you're fat guy in a little coat too for me.
Right.
So, but um, here's an interesting question before we kind of dive in here. So, Mitch is really excited about rocking his first double-breasted suit tomorrow.
Yeah.
Very excited. What he asked, what your favorite tie knots, and I remember when you worked with Ike Karapides really closely. I remember he rocked in a couple of days I saw them in a row. He rocked some really unusual tie knots too, which I thought was really
Yep.
cool. So,
So for me, I've learned there's a direct correlation and relationship between lapel width, collar width, and tie knot. And they all need to be in sync. So if you have a wide lapel suit, you should have a fairly spread collar and you can fit a fatter knot. If you have a narrower lapel, then your collar should be also slightly more narrow. And then as a direct consequence of that, you would have a smaller knot.
I always like the wider colors. I noticed over
Yeah,
time and stuff. Obviously because they also didn't look like they were squeezing my head too.
I tend to skew wider lapels, wider collar, wider knot.
Yeah, it's interesting because I'm a bigger guy than you, obviously. But yet I think that they're both complementary on both our very different types of frames, which is interesting. Of course, not many people could see my tie anyway with my beard, but that's beside
Fair
the
enough.
point. So, I could wear what I do not I wanted to, I suppose. I used to really like bow ties. I was really into bow ties when they were really popular. And now they're definitely pointless with my beard length. So, how's that? How's the rye treating you right now?
It's perfect, man. I really like this one. It's a hot one. It's 97%,
Oh, sure.
97 proof. So it benefits from a little tempering, but it's got this really nice for being a rye, it has its sort of signature spiciness, but it's also got this very clean, almost vanilla sweetness that with this elegancia is just the perfect end to a weekend.
Nice. Well, wonderful, wonderful. Well, that will take us actually into our tonight's major point, which is always brought to you by Gran Habano Cigars. From the fertile lands of Honduras, George Rico and his family put together the very best vintages for you. Yes, you, the cigar smoker. From the value-based hits like the Corojo Number 5 to the award-winning 20th anniversary to special projects like Zulu Zulu, Gran Habano is about cultivating the best and making pinnacle cigars for the market. Culture, tradition, quality, premium, handcrafted. Gran Habano cigars. So, Michael, you gave an interview recently with one of my colleagues on the Cigar Coop Coalition at the PCA trade show, in which you and Trip were talking about stories and how a good cigar should tell a story. And I think you're one of the finest storytellers in the cigar industry. I've always been captivated by your words, in particular. I've always found them inspiring, and then you also tell a story incredibly well. So I thought we would actually do a collection of telling stories, and I know you've told a lot of the same stories over time. So I'm going to ask a little bit we can try to dig a little deep tonight. So maybe tell a story that you haven't told very often, or maybe one that you haven't shared before. So, so let's get started. And we'll make this one easy because obviously it's a very recent past. This year's PCA trade show. What was one of your favorite moments, other than the sandwich videos you made with Cigar Dojo, because those were quite hilarious. You and Fred really did a number on social media. I loved it.
That
Um,
was that was wild. Too funny. It's nice when funny moments just happen.
okay, so that was actually the thing. So while you're thinking of a story necessarily, this is like, I don't know, the third or fourth edition, if you will, of these funny, like almost Saturday Night Live sketch type things that you and Eric and Jordan from Dojo have just kind of developed. I mean, I have a feeling they're pretty organic. I mean, obviously they're staged,
Completely.
but it's comical how you guys get together. Is it just like really great chemistry, or like what's the
I mean, obviously, I think chemistry helps. They're funny guys. It started with the original urinal interview from TPE 21,
yeah, 2021, right?
where we were there, but we had nothing. We had nothing. We had just announced our distribution deal. We had no product, no inventory, and so they were like, "Hey, we want to talk to you about Ferio Tego." And I was like, "I don't want to stand in a Davidoff booth talking about Ferio Tego when we have nothing to show." So I'm like, "Can we do the interview somewhere else?" And they were like, "Yeah, where do you want to do it?" And then we came up with the bathroom idea, which was hysterical, only to be outdone the following year by the stall edition, which was even funnier. And the sandwich thing was like they were shooting at a booth, and I was walking by, and I just said to them, like, "Do you believe this shit? This is, $47 for a shit sandwich, bag of chips, and a drink in this culinary mecca of Las Vegas." And they were like, "Hold on, hold on, hold on," and just
Hit record.
hit record.
Nice.
And I was like, "All right, let's do it."
Uh, that no, that notwithstanding, I think that it's the I really I what I really appreciate about Michael and Jordan's storytelling is that they I feel like they know how to take it just to that point where it's not overplayed, and they know exactly when to quit. Like this, like the urinal was great, the stall was a great second edition of that, and then there wasn't like anything further to it, right?
Right.
You know, I guess you could leave room for it. Maybe they'll interview you in your bath in New York City at some point, but like, you know,
We listen,
for the time being.
we've thought about all kinds of funny follow-ups to those, but you also have to like let things just be organically funny. And
Uh-huh.
when things get too planned, the thing that you think is going to be the funniest never hits, and then it's a flop, and then it's embarrassing, and so forget it.
Have you always thought of yourself as someone with comedic ability, or is it just something that naturally comes out? Because I've always found you funny, just naturally.
I've never I wouldn't say I considered myself funny uh as a personality descriptor. Never.
Oh,
Um
interesting. Okay.
yeah, until I mean I suppose now in the last maybe 10 or 12 years, but no, I would not consider myself funny. I think I've my my humor has evolved, and my I think what helps is because of my background as a musician, having spent as much time as I did on stages and being in front of people, I have no problem being in front of people. And, I don't get stage fright. I'm able to think clearly. And so I think that helps a
Mhm.
little bit, whether I'm trying to convey a really meaningful point or um, if something strikes me funny and it's a perfect opportunity for a punchline, then I blaze through that lane and take it.
Yeah. Excuse me. I think that's what where I've found you to be the most you're the funniest is it's a very observational humor. I wouldn't describe you as like a stand-up comedian necessarily, like
Right.
but it's just very like things that are just observational, and you just make an aside or a quick wit, quick quip about it or something that usually just has me has has me in chuckles or has me in stitches depending on the level of
I think that's well described. I mean, it's creating a punchline in the moment that's relevant that hopefully just hits. I can't tell a joke to save my life, but there has to be levity and humor. I Laughter to me is just the greatest. If you can make somebody laugh or you can laugh together with someone and share that moment of actual real happiness and bliss and whatever that short moment is. I mean, that's magical stuff.
Yeah, it's we're actually I was actually having this conversation with someone who doesn't know you, and I was trying to describe you, and like because someone was asking me about who I was interviewing this week, and I was trying to describe it like, well, what's he like? And I said, and uh, you know, it was my brother, him and I do a lot of movie quotes back and forth, and we could recite several movies from start to finish, pretty much exclusively, and I was like, and I kind of a la Mark Wahlberg from The Departed. I was like, he's like a lace curtain motherfucker that just is hilarious, and he, he's very 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 polished, but he has this side of him that is just, to your point, brings levity to almost any situation that I happen to be in, and because I remember the first time I sat down with you at IPCPR with Coop, and it was with you were still with Altria, Nat Sherman at the time, and there it was a very much different interview than the Ferio Tego ones we do now. And it was a sit down, and there was a lot of structure to it, but even then it was just very there were still the bits and pieces of the Michael that I know and I love, with just those moments of levity that were just kind of inserted. And having not known you as much as I do now, at the time it just was it took me aback. And
And I think
I
it's
was
important too, especially since so many people see and hear me in a suit. That there's an assumption that it's all polish all the time. Everything is serious, everything is corporate, everything's buttoned up. And that's just not the reality. When I have to be buttoned up, I'm buttoned up, but you can still be funny in a suit. You know what I mean?
yeah.
You can still be yourself. And so I try and make sure that we incorporate all that.
I think that was very, for at least for my personal opinion of you. I think that was very important early on to just to understand. understand your humanity a little bit. Um, and I think that's done, fast forward a few years, and I think that's done very well for you, as
Yeah.
you've established your own brand as well. I think that's extremely extremely becoming. And you have a magnetic personality too, so it kind of adds to that as well, and kind of brings people towards you and brings people towards your brand, which is probably
I need
is
as many
exactly what
people coming towards me as possible, my man.
which is, yeah, I was gonna say, which is why you've been so successful so far with this, which is great. So yeah, I mean, yeah, I kind of started off with a question. We kind of got off topic a little bit, but so I mean, what was a funny story, or it doesn't have to be funny, but what was an interesting story that came out of this year's PCA trade show that maybe you haven't shared, or maybe just kind of in certain circles have?
Um, I mean, the show was great. I think the energy, the enthusiasm, the momentum, it reminds me of shows when I was a kid, when I first started. The energy and excitement, not just that I felt, but that I could tell other people felt too. Uh, I haven't felt that in a long time. And maybe it's, now my what a third, fourth show as a brand owner. Maybe there's something there, but I was just talking with Pete Johnson about this last week, and he said the same thing. Like it felt like the early 2003, 2004, 2005 when we were just filled with awe and excitement, and it was just great. But I will say that some of my greatest moments of this year's show were dining experiences. I went, I typically go my first night in Vegas to Delmonico's, which, as you know, is
Yeah,
my home in Las Vegas. And I sat at the bar, and I knew a bunch of the people there, and they're coming over, giving me hugs, and how's it going, and what's this, and we typically do a cocktail party there. We didn't do it this year because what even though it was such a great show, the logistics of all the activities, the multiple locations, there was no easy way to execute a 2 hour happy hour in between all the stuff that was going on. So we just passed. But in chatting with the guys at the restaurant, it came up. Chef Ronnie, who's the head culinary guy for Vegas, said, "Hey, have you ever been to the Fish House, which was Emerald's original Vegas restaurant?" And I said, "No, I've actually never been." He's like, "Oh, you should come." So on Friday night, Friday night, uh, we did just a team dinner, five of us, and we ate at the chef's table, which is a glass partition between the kitchen and the dining room. And the five of us sat down and did a chef's tasting. No menus, no anything, just go. And
nice.
it was such a great way to kick off that show together as a team. Um, it was Brendan and I and our three folks from Davidoff that came to support us. And it was just so nice to have a really memorable and impressive meal. That I mean, it really was impressive. Everything was thoughtful. The dishes, the way they were plated, the service, it was all just so well done. And it was just a perfect way to start. Um, so that one really stands out to me. And then I had another dinner towards the end at Delmonico in the at the chef's table there with all kind of younger, like my generation or even a generation after me of retailers. And we just went out for a
Oh,
nice
that's cool.
meal. Some I knew well, some I didn't know as well. It was only eight of us in the chef's table, and then we had another five at a table just outside. But it was just really nice to be able to share that kind of experience too with folks that probably had never experienced it, and do it in a way, in a place that was so meaningful to me, where they really went above and beyond. So that was great.
That's awesome. I think that's a really interesting approach. You as you were talking about who's at that table with you. I think really interesting approach. I think business at the trade show is something I wanted to get into. I want to get into more and more in coming years, because the dinners have always been fun and been a topical conversation, for everyone. It seems coming out of the trade show and everything. And I've always wondered, and I've just never asked, and about approach. Like who do you invite to dinner? Like who makes the cut? Why is it that cut? You know,
It's a tricky, it's a tricky thing. My approach is not a conventional approach, I don't think. It's not just taking out your biggest spenders or, my whole approach to the show, I think, is rather unconventional. The way you express your gratitude to your best partners is to be a better partner. It's not buying them dinner in Las Vegas with 100 other people. That's not meaningful. Meaningful is showing up at their store on a Thursday and doing a staff training and then doing an event and showing gratitude and sharing stories to those people in that establishment. That is great partnership, and that's how you demonstrate and reward your best partners. To me, the no different than the booth. We don't have a booth at the trade show to sell cigars in because we sell cigars to the same people 360 days a year, besides the 5 that we're together in Las Vegas. So my whole goal from the moment I land until the moment I take off is to have the most meaningful conversations I can have with people. Uh, and those could be prospects, those could be existing customers, but it's not walking through a blend and trying to get a sale. It's understanding what's working today, what's not working, what we can do better, what we're unwilling to do, and just better understand people's businesses and their philosophies. Um, so that time in that for this meal was all, I don't think there was anyone who was 40, to be honest, as a
well, that's
guest, maybe early 40s.
that's
Um,
exciting though
two,
for the
two
future of the
were
industry.
two were next generation retailers, whose parents own stores and now they're moving up in leadership, ownership in some case. And so that was two. Three were four, actually, the other four were non-owner, non-relative, but decision-making, proven leaders within their respective stores. So decision rights, leadership, but are not owners. They're great employees, and it was awesome. And we didn't talk cigars. That was the other thing. We talked about the food, we talked about the restaurant, we talked about our lives, the things we like to do, what we always imagined we would be when we were kids, and then how all those dreams have completely fallen apart, and now here we are. It was great. It was really great.
Yeah, but unlike most people, Michael, I still think that as cool as a jazz musician would have been, you still ended up to be a very, what we, quote unquote cool individual, you know.
Oh man, listen, whether I'm playing drums or selling cigars, I'm the same guy, I mean, it's all rooted in the same place. It all hits the same passion points in my heart and soul. So, I'm quite confident that uh I probably wouldn't be much different. Although I don't know if I would be happily married with a beautiful family um if I was a musician, because all of that happened as a result of my cigar world,
There
meeting
you
my
go.
wife and all that. So yeah, no regrets, not at all.
You mentioned Pete Johnson a moment ago, and you mentioned kind of the vibe of the trade show. I thought the vibe got kicked off incredibly well. The seminars this year were probably the best ever. Actually, I'll go ahead and say it. They were the best that I've ever attended. And there seemed to be, for people who've attended more years than I have, seem to catch that feeling kind of as well. And it was kicked off by the latest edition in the hand rolled series, docu series that they've kind of done. So they did, of course, the original documentary, J.C. Newman, and now they're working on releasing I don't know quite how to describe it. It's the Pete Johnson, George Brightman, my father, you know,
I mean, there's
tapestry.
still there's still some to go,
Right.
they didn't show. And I actually talked with Pete about this too, because I felt the only quote so far that I saw, and we shot for probably almost 2 hours when I was in California. They came and met me, and we shot. The only quote of mine that was in there was about George, who I love dearly.
Hmm.
But I was like, Pete, the whole reason I went was to talk about you. And obviously, George was an important part of that story, as he was of my story. But I'm looking forward to seeing it in its completion, because
Yes.
I think what was not showed um, is what will kind of bring this whole thing full circle. And Pete's got a pretty epic story, man.
I really loved your introduction into it though. So the shot comes in, it's a resting cigar on an ashtray, a tatuaje of all things. And I say of all things, obviously that was the center point of the episode, but I didn't know who they were going to put into the frame, and then you walked in,
Yeah.
and your trademark blazer and everything, and then you sat down um for me, I told Jesse this. I happen to have a nice relationship with Jesse. I love Steve as well, but I'm not as close with him. But I told Jesse that it's, and I'm a huge fan. I'm a huge fan of their work overall. But I told Jesse that that's the best thing that they've ever done. And I know it's not even finished yet, and I think it's the best.
The Pete one.
The Pete Johnson one, yeah, absolutely.
But there were
Um,
also, if you look at the first one, they liked cigars. But I think they've evolved in their understanding and knowledge of the people in the industry, and probably it needs less direction and more editing, because people are just gonna say the things that matter most, and it's probably their job to splice, clean it up, and make it meaningful.
yeah,
But they do a hell of a great job, man.
yeah.
That's a serious setup, man.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
I mean,
1000%.
couldn't believe walking into that room. Uh, I'm trying to remember where we shot. It was downtown Napa. Um, oh man, I mean, cameras galore, and this is not a bullshit, you
Yeah.
know, D-list docu. These guys are serious filmmakers.
Yeah, it's impressive, and it's a nice theme being about stories. It certainly they certainly fall into that category, which is really great. The and I can't wait to see the rest of it, and it's really great, and I can't wait to have them back on to talk more about it. But you kind of mentioned that kind of excitement that it kind of returned to the show. I felt that way too. I felt like the attendance on day one was the best attendance that I'd seen, and I've been going since 2018. So obviously my history is a lot shorter than yours and some of the other brand owners like Pete and others. Um, but for me, it was the best day one that I've seen. And I thought like the vibe was still there. Everyone was very positive. That's
Here's what
kind
I'll
of the
tell
overall
you.
theme.
The the numbers were record setting, if not almost record setting. Attendance from retailers, stores represented, um, total badges, vendors, number of brands. It was it was a total smash success. I also think that your point about the seminars and all the other programming outside of the room was the best it's ever been. And my criticism for years has been that the show has been the focal point, and that it's become this mass order taking operation, as opposed to the the um the convention non-trade show side of the annual convention and trade show. The convention side is the education side,
Hmm.
and the brainstorming side, and the think tank side. The experts in the room learn about new trends and new things. That's what every other convention in the world is. Medical, uh, teachers, auto, electronics, it's constantly about evolving and what's happening and get people who are really good at those things
Hmm.
together and share what they know. And whether it was because lack of interest in attendance or uh, lack of interesting topics or execution, I'm not sure why it didn't happen. But the last few years, certainly post lockdowns, you're seeing that side really improve. And that's obviously very deliberate from a board side, which I'm very proud to serve on.
That was
But
going to be where I was going. Yeah.
and so even when there are these moments where like, oh, the floor feels light, well, that may be so, but go look in the hall where the seminar is taking place and it was full. And to me, that is that's something we have to get used to, that the floor is not going to be this wall to wall, shoulder to shoulder uh, uh, carnival for 5 days, because there are other meaningful things happening. And I would I would take a show like that over um, shitty seminars and wall to wall people where you can't have meaningful discussions or get actual work done. So it was great. And I think it was huge credit to the board, huge credit to manufacturers, and serious credit to retailers for scrambling and adjusting their schedules and showing up and putting in the work.
So, what was something you see? You mentioned being that you're now on the board, which has been the case for the last couple of years now, which is it's really exciting to see some of the people like you and Jared Trudeau and others, Christian, on the board. They kind of you mentioned youthful exuberance, and you three are certain. Well, Christian has certainly been around for a long time in the industry. I still consider him a young man.
He's not that much older than I am.
Yeah, that's crazy considering how long he's been doing this. I mean, and two successful ventures in Camacho and now his brands as well. But well, not but in addition to that, I kind of wanted to get your perspective, and it doesn't necessarily have to be an idea that you were even in support of, or maybe even started. But what was something that came out of those? Now hindsight being 2020, something that came out of those board meetings over the past year and a half that was going to put this trade show, new time of year, everything on the map, that ultimately it came to fruition and you were like, it came together. This is exactly, I mean, did we already hit on with the seminars? Was it something else that
No,
kind of
March. We
clicked?
changed the date.
Yeah.
I mean,
And
it was
you
the
feel like it made that made all the difference in the world.
I think it will. I think the initial adjustment is a learning curve for everybody. I mean, you're talking about one of the most radical shifts in um, the rhythm of our industry. Moving trade show date is profoundly impactful up and down the chain.
Mm-hmm.
And there was no way to know what would happen until we just did it, but we did. And we did it because the membership voted overwhelmingly that they wanted the date changed and were in fact uh, open and in favor of a date change, even if the venue had to change and even if the city had to change. The date was the single most important thing to retailers and to manufacturers across the board in that survey. So that says to me that this is a board that listens and cares, who serves on behalf of the members
Mm-hmm.
and responds accordingly. And but going from July to March is not a big window, and you have to be very thoughtful, at least we did, about how aggressively we want to um, push on, let's say, product launches, for example, versus just meaningful conversations and other things. And we did not think it was worth accelerating launches to the show. So it was a slightly different feel in this sort of gap year. But I am so excited about the 2025 show. It couldn't come. I cannot wait. I think that's going to be an unbelievable show. New city, the right dates. Uh, it is ripe for overwhelming success.
Yeah, I'm looking forward. I've only attended trade shows in Vegas. You obviously have been to a number of different locations, but Vegas has been home for, almost a decade now. I mean, what are you looking forward to most of the geographical move?
It's an opportunity for new people. I mean, every time it moves, it gives opportunity for a few folks that either can't afford Vegas, don't like Vegas, for whatever reason, Vegas isn't in the cards for them. New Orleans is different. It's geographically closer to a completely different area of the country that will always draw uh, local retailers that wouldn't necessarily fly to Vegas but could drive to New Orleans. So always an uptick from Texas, for example, in New Orleans that don't come to Vegas. But I just think it's, something new and different and fresh. The scene is great. And March, New Orleans is a very different experience than July, New Orleans, just like Vegas. So I think it's going to be tremendous.
What are the pieces of feedback that was kind of floating around, and it's gotten several good responses, so I don't necessarily feel like rehashing it too much, but I wanted to get your thoughts on, New Orleans has had a drastic changes in the last few years, and I'm not talking about hurricanes. I'm talking about, you know, uh, culturally. This was, the Big Easy was seen very much like similar to Las Vegas, a kind of wild west of a town, where, you know, quote unquote vice could run free, the drinking and, smoking, etc. But it's gone non-smoking. It's a non-smoking city. And, I for one was, I had apprehension, just candidly, I had apprehension about supporting a city that was very much opposed to us. I've gotten some great feedback from,
I,
board members that have said that they've bent over backwards to make us
yeah,
feel welcome.
that's not an accurate um, representation of the city. And that's not to be critical. It's just there are certainly places that are non-smoking because Vegas is non-smoking. I mean, except for casino floors and cigar
Mhm.
bars, you can't smoke in Las Vegas either. So, there are still places where you can smoke, and the city has been unbelievably supportive and accommodating um, in making sure that we can still have places where we can enjoy cigars. The fact that we can still do it in the convention center is of great importance. There's some issue about the outdoor smoking, but that's not specifically outdoor smoking. That's also outdoor eating, drinking, smoking, all outdoor patio entertainment they're trying to restrict. But you know,
Interesting.
that's not that's not at all specific to smoking itself. Smoking is a consequence, or the lack of smoking would be a consequence to that particular ordinance or whatever it is.
Okay.
But our communication with New Orleans continues to be overwhelmingly favorable, hospitable. They are eager to have us. They want us back. And you know, I am very encouraged for that show.
That's great.
And it's also going to be 70 degrees out. I mean, it's going to be beautiful weather to be
Hmm.
walking around outside, just like Vegas was in March.
It's very
Have a
much a
cigar
pedestrian
outside.
city too. So
Yeah.
yeah, so that'll be nice. Um, really looking forward to it. I haven't spent much time in New Orleans. I've been to New Orleans, haven't spent much time there, so it'll be nice to experience the city in a different way, especially in my, adult life. I was a lot
And
younger
that's
when I
Emerald's
first.
home base. So
Yeah,
I'm
there you
in
go.
I'm in my glory.
There you go. Yeah. I was gonna that's actually gonna come up later on in tonight's conversation, Michael. But the wanted to go back to something that I found interesting. You and I talked a little bit offline about the expansion of the Cigar Coop Coalition team, how we brought in the Let's Get Pairing team and Trip and Dennis, and we're kind of expanding coverage of the industry as a whole, which obviously means we're covering the PCA trade show differently as well. Um, but I wanted to get your thoughts. You've been around, as a long time. We've talked about this several times now. We've mentioned this tonight specifically. What's what have you noticed about the way that the trade show is covered overall? The last over the last couple of decades, how has it kind of evolved, and how's it gotten better? If it's gotten worse in some ways, I mean, like, what's your overall kind of take on how the show is actually covered from a media perspective?
I think it's only gotten better. I mean, you know, 20 years ago, the show was only covered by um, the sort of established media, uh, and not certainly not to the extent and detail that is covered today, but with the amount of passionate, interested, engaged uh, media, whether they're bloggers, whether they're influencers, whatever they are, these are people who are taking time to show up and to participate and get content and share it. That's, there was more coverage this year than last year, more last year than the year before. I think it's nothing but favorable. The only downside is the inability to amplify that content because of the restrictions of the social media platforms.
Hmm.
But I'm a big believer in, we need more coverage. We need more content. The more that goes out, the more that fits through some of those barriers, and more people will see the great things that happen at that show. So I'm a I'm a big fan.
I think it's really important to for coverage to evolve to similar to the way that the industry has evolved as well. Um, and I think that's what's really exciting about what we're doing in particular. And I'm not looking for an attaboy or anything here, but one of the observations that I've had in the last couple of years, and it was really prominent for me this year, Michael. And I don't know, I know you spent a lot of time in your booth. I don't know if you got wind of this or kind of observed it in a different way, particularly. But one of the things that I've noticed specifically about this year's show, as opposed to other shows, is, I mean, I rarely get into conversations at the trade show about wrapper, binder, filler. That's different. We kind of cover that stuff on the written side of coverage, but in conversations, you know, it's a lot. It's a lot more. To your point from earlier, it's a lot more meaningful conversation. At least that's what I'm going for, and I think we accomplished that really well. But there was a lot less talk, kind of about wrapper, binder, filler, and everything. And it almost kind of reminded me of a little bit of yesteryear. Not in a poor way, not in a bad way or anything like that. But I mean, obviously, it, the last, 15 years have been this kind of really slow, deep dive into our wrapper is this particular this particular leaf, this particular priming, this particular field. Like, it got
But I
like
think a lot of
really
that, Bear, is a
nuanced.
I think that's a result of um, a maturing media that's not, they're people are showing up prepared. They're showing up with appointments. They're showing up with questions ready, with unique perspectives that are going to create content that is unique for that particular platform, which means it's not, tell us about your latest release. Walk us through the blend of this. There's a desire to get original content and original material. And the brands that are at their best, brands from the media side, are coming in prepared and more experienced than they were last year or the year before. And so if you take all of that, it's the best it's ever been.
That's Well, I mean, I appreciate the kind words. To your point about, again, to go back to the overall vibe and everything. What was it like seeing? And I know I know the answer is going to be positive because I know your personal feelings on it. But like, what was it like from a vendor perspective to have three of the quote unquote big four back, especially Drew Estate, in its not quite as large as it had before, but certainly in its in its very much its essence,
Great.
still loud, still bold. It felt like Drew Estate was back, and it's kind of a
Drew
original
State
way.
was back.
Hmm.
They were back. it was tremendous. I was The show felt great. I mean, I don't know how to say it differently.
Mhm.
It was great to see people there. I'm pleased that um, whatever barriers stood in their way, for most of those companies, they were able to overcome those issues. Again, I think that also speaks a little bit to the board and the association and the fact that whatever some of those concerns were, they've been um, addressed.
Mhm.
And, our industry is better together. And I think you saw that 2 weeks ago.
I was privileged to be a part of a very unique experience in the Drew Estate booth where they were actually interviewing retailers, and in some cases, like myself, they interviewed even media members, which was really cool. As part of their their freestyle live series. Um, and I thought that was a really unique spin on some things, and I really enjoyed that experience. It was um kind of surreal in a real way.
It's great.
Jonathan Drew asking me questions, which should have been normally the other way around, which was cool. Um, but I imagine, like, going back to your retail days, if you'd been in retail and asked to kind of participate in that, I imagine that would have felt pretty good and very encouraging, for especially because I'm sure your retail days you invested in good folks like Jonathan and other brands too.
Listen, I've known Jonathan from, his early days. Uh, so had I been a retailer this year and been interviewed by Jonathan, that would have been an awfully long trip down memory lane, seeing all the success that he's achieved now. But, they're a great example of a company that spends a tremendous amount of time thinking how to be innovative and do things differently without being a gimmick. That's a very delicate line to walk, and they do a great job doing it.
You mentioned, how we talked about how coverage has evolved and experience has evolved, and we've mentioned it in a positive way. What do you think that this show, like, realistically, like, I think there's hope there, obviously, for us two specifically, and hopefully the majority of the like. But um, do you think that there is an actual realistic opportunity for this trade show to garner more mainstream acclaim and more mainstream coverage? Um, and and
Mainstream, what do you mean?
cover in the sense of, like, this is just Cigar Aficionado is the biggest publication that covers the trade show, right? And this isn't this isn't a snide at them or anything like that. I mean, Marvin in some ways is responsible for the cigar boom, as he's been accredited to, and rightfully so. There's a lot to attribute to that publication. What I'm saying, like, more mainstream in the sense of, like, stuff outside of the cigar industry, a Newsweek or USA Today, or
No chance.
more. Why do you think that is?
Because we have a scarlet letter. Tobacco is always going to be a problem. I can't tell you how many high profile celebrity level friends I have that love our cigars and will not post them for the simple fact that it will affect their ability to remain in public image. It's so um it's so triggering that there's just no way that mainstream. Now, Newsweek, Maxim, GQ, they are never going to cover the inner workings of industry. Now, I give some of them credit that they do at least incorporate and recognize the cigar world within the lifestyle and brand of their respective media brands. So we've had a couple features on Maxim, which has
I was
been
going to
very,
mention
very
this. I was going to
cool.
say this later. How did I miss this, Michael? I just saw this, and it's
Yeah,
like
it was
it was like
awesome.
it was like an article from 2 years ago,
We've
and
had two. We had one 2 years ago when we launched, and then we had one just a year ago,
oh,
or
that's
eight
right.
eight months ago, right around the time Suma launched. And Maxim picked up on it. But Maxim's always, they reached out to me even 5 years ago and would talk about would want like 7 things to know, 7 things cigar smokers have to know, and all that kind of stuff. Um, Rob Report always includes a little. So there's some within the lifestyle world who are willing to take a little risk, but even those, they don't double down and amplify it on social or on other stuff. They kind of print it and slide it in and hope it doesn't rock the boat. But this is never going to be any of their number one priorities. And yet it is, in the anti-world, it is their number one priority to make sure no one is talking about this in a favorable way. And so when you have people who are making it their number one priority to find the few mentions within mainstream, they will pay a price that is not worth it to be favorable to us. So that's why they're just silent.
Like, for example, the Nick Jonas cigar aficionado cover controversy from a couple years ago. Like how much flack
I wasn't even thinking that. I was thinking more like non-industry media, like you mentioned Newsweek and other stuff.
Yeah.
Like we're just never going to win there. If you go into the more legacy, bigger brand industry media, it's just not their model. It's not what they do. I think they're still more lifestyle, even though it's cigar specific, but it's not to the level of detail, every company, every booth, everything, because there's just other stuff that they feature, which is why I think it's such a great opportunity for new media to sort of take that lane. You guys are the ones who do the in-depth interviews with multiple brands and upcoming brands and all that stuff. That's a unique attribute. So I don't look at some of the larger traditional media and criticize them for not doing it if it's not their model. I see that the reason the new media exists is because there's a clear lane that new media has found their way down and takes an ownership stake in. It's something you should be proud of.
I mean, I do, because I think, the whole reason that I do this, and I've said it thousands of times on the show in particular, but I mean, it's conversations like this, Michael. It's showing the human side of the industry. I think that, like you said, to your point, we can nerd out on wrapper binder filler off camera. I mean, that stuff's fun to talk about. But I think it's the meaningful conversations that we have that really kind of garner the coverage of the way that I hope coverage kind of continues and stuff like that. And that's kind of been my take and my spin on it for years. And that'll be it for the foreseeable future, as long as I'm privileged enough and fortunate enough to do it. So
I think new businesses and new brands and upcoming projects, wrapper binder filler only goes so far. You have to be able to share what's behind it. And I think consumers resonate with that in a way that is profoundly personal. And to have an opportunity like this to talk about things beyond wrapper binder filler, you can find wrapper binder filler easily. Just Google, boom, wrapper binder filler, all the blends, everything you want to know, it's all there. But what else do you want to know? Do you want to know why we started the business? Do you want to know why that blend exists? Those stories behind the stories are what really create the authenticity that, and more importantly, the points of differentiation that make one brand different from another.
You mentioned up and coming brands. This I'll just leave this question. This kind of will segue us into latter points of the conversation here, and then we're going to take a brief break here in a moment. But one of the things, and this is the second time that this has happened, of my knowing of it so vividly, at least, Michael. And I think, and I don't want to mischaracterize it, because I think you're a tiring supporter of new brands, and the hustle and the grind that people put into it. Not to put too fine a point on it, but someone that had some really kind words to say about you. And I remember the first time it meant so much to Juan Cancel when he came out with Sir Robert Peel, and you noticed it, and I think when you said you had some kind words for him and his brand about it in particular years ago, and those words meant a lot. And equally so, this turn around, I had the opportunity to speak with Mike Stepankevich of Pastania
Oh
Cigars,
yeah.
and apparently you had some really kind, considerate, and insightful words for him that really meant a lot to him. And Mike's not terribly sentimental. He is when it comes to family, but he's a sensational businessman.
Yeah.
Him and his brother are terrific businessmen. I love talking just in general business with them, business practice and things like that. They're fascinating men. But it struck a chord with him, and it was really encouraging to him, some of the words that you had for him, which was I thought I shared simply to say that I appreciate it, that you took the time to encourage small brands as well. You talked about what we're doing on the media side for new brands, but I think what you do is also just as important, if not more so.
Well, we all work hard, and uh, it's we know we're doing good jobs, but it's just nice to get a little affirmation that people see it, you know? For
Mhm.
me, it's there's a the golden rule of do unto others really matters more than it ever has, because so much of what we do today is not face to face and in person where at the conclusion of a meeting we could say, hey, that was really great, you did a great job, or something like that. It's all, it's thankless. You take a video, you do a post, you do something meaningful, you put it out, and you wait. You don't get that immediate understanding of whether something went well or not. So I just think that, when people are doing cool shit, you got to tell them and tell somebody else, did you see this?
Mhm.
And Mike's one of those guys, man. He, especially on the social side and the content side, man, he's killing it.
One of the I would call it themes of your personality, Michael, has always been authenticity. You use that word habitually. It does a disservice to the word, because I think I think habit has a negative connotation, like it's routine for you, and it's not. I couldn't disagree with that more. I think you're very precise with your use of the word authenticity, and it's very important to you, and it's very clear that it's a core part of your personality, your mantra, how you operate. um and you use that word specifically with him, and I think that's what struck a chord with him. And from my observation, I think that's something that I recognize in both of you as two terribly authentic people. That and I think
We
that's why
don't
you're
know
so
each other
successful.
well, but in the exchanges that we've had over the years, you know, I uh, I think we both have real like mutual admiration for each other and the work that
Mhm.
the other one is doing, and so it's just nice to point it out.
Absolutely. Um, so with that, we're gonna go ahead and take a quick break. We have a couple more things I wanted to cover. We're gonna take a quick break and do one of our fun segments, which is our um United Presidential Trivia segment, which is, of course, always brought to
Ah,
you by United Cigars, featuring La Giana Havana, distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero, Garofalo, the Firecracker, and the highly acclaimed Atabey, Byron, and now Alfonso lines from Selected Tobacco. Smoke one today and start living United. Don't yawn yet,
I
Michael. Don't.
suck at this. I suck at this.
It's uh it's multiple choice, man. It's all good. Don't worry about it. I think you got the last one right too. So don't. I wouldn't hate on yourself so much. But I thought this question was an interesting connection to your personality. You hail from, uh, you know, um, you home. New York is home to you, and we've talked about your sense of style. And so, as we've mentioned on a previous show, Harry Truman was a haberdasher in his previous life. He owned a haberdashery before he got into politics, and then he eventually became president of the United States. And in 1948, he upset Thomas Dewey, governor of New York, in a very, very prominent upset. You know, the infamous picture of Truman holding the newspaper that was incorrect that said Dewey defeats Truman. Obviously, that did not happen. But so here's my question: which ticket of politicians came in third in that election? So was it A, Henry Wallace and Glenn Taylor of the Progressive Party, which is actually a spinoff of the Bull Moose Party from Teddy Roosevelt? B, Strom Thurmond and Fielding Wright of the States' Rights Party, or known affectionately or not affectionately as the Dixiecrat Party. Or C, Norman Thomas and Tucker P. Smith of the Socialist Party, who came in third in that election.
What year?
1948.
What was the first one again?
The first one was Henry Wallace and Glenn Taylor of the Progressive Party.
I'm gonna go with them.
Okay. It was actually Strom Thurmond Fielding Wright, believe it or not.
No shit.
Yeah. So they campaigned on their their campaign on the opposition to a lot of Truman's civil rights movements, including, he was the one that desegregated the military. So that was kind of the linchpin that kind of got them fired up and kind of spun off the Dixiecrats, or what they called the States' Rights Party. They
I've
actually
never
got
heard of Dixiecrats.
they got electoral votes that year, man. It was crazy. They've got 39 electoral votes in the election.
That's gonna be worth a rabbit hole tomorrow.
Yeah.
Dixiecrats.
So the probably the most famous Dixiecrat candidate was Governor Wallace of Alabama.
How many times did these Dixiecrats participate?
They were in a few elections, mostly in the mid 1900s. Never gained but not too much more prominence than this. But this
Sounds
was
like a country cover band.
well, this was the beginning of the party shift, because again, if you look at the map, and here I'll go ahead and share my screen here. So, the there's obviously a lot more that goes into this, but in an easy way of saying it for the layman who doesn't understand politics too much today, there are red states and blue states, as everybody knows. Well, back, there was a party shift in the 1900s where traditional Democrats became Republican and traditional Republicans became Democrats, and there was basically a complete flip-flop of the country. And if you can see from the map here, the Democrats held the South, ever since the 1800s. That was their stronghold. And as you can see here, this is where we start to see that party shift, because the Dixiecrat Party, or the States' Rights Party, was a split from the Democrat. Strom Thurmond was a Democrat until about this time, and that's when he switched to the Republican Party after the Civil Rights Movement in the 1960s and everything. So this was kind of the precursor to that, and you can see that his party took electoral votes in Louisiana, Alabama, Mississippi, his home state of South Carolina, and an electoral vote of Tennessee, which is crazy. In today's day and age, you would think it is crazy that a third party could actually garner electoral votes, which is just nuts. So
wild.
Yeah, really, really interesting. But Dewey carried the Midwest, got Oregon randomly, and his home state of New York, obviously, and then some other northeastern states. But everyone else was very much Truman.
It was all Truman the haberdasher.
Truman the haberdasher. 303 electoral votes. Everyone said it was an upset, but he actually, as you can see, won by a pretty big landslide, despite the split in the Democratic Party, which is kind of crazy. If that had never happened, he would have demolished him even more.
How about that? Be curious to see what the map looks like this year.
Yep. Presidential election year is always one of my favorites to cover. Coop and I do an election show every year in November, and we always kind of cover it from an observational standpoint. No politics are involved, just political observation. Great. Is what we call it.
I love it.
So So that was our United Presidential Trivia segment brought to you by, it's always Michael's favorite, brought to you by United Cigars, featuring La Giana Havana, distributors of Jose Dominguez, Bandolero, Garofalo, the Firecracker, and the highly acclaimed Atabay and Byron lines, now Alfonso lines from Selected Tobacco. Smoke one today and start living united. Something I know you have an interest in some cool charity works too, Michael. One of the projects that United's doing that I'm really excited about is the United Gold Star project, that is supporting some veteran charities, which I'm always a huge proponent of. So I'm giving them another plug. They didn't actually pay for this one. So but shout out to Oliver and what he's doing for veterans. Always the United does some great stuff for veteran stuff. And as a son of a veteran, I'm always keen on that stuff. So the United Gold Star project, something pretty cool. And the cigar is really great. So I have a couple. I'll send you one, Michael. I think you'd
Oh,
enjoy
it's
it.
a cigar for that fundraisers for the project.
For veterans. Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. So well, awesome. Well, getting back into PCA storage, we talked a lot about this year's trade show, but I wanted to kind of take us a little bit back in time, Michael, to your very first trade show. What year was that?
2003.
2003. And you were there as a retailer, correct?
Yeah, I mean, really, I was there as a as a guest of the GM of the Davidoff store. I had no decision rights. I was a sales associate.
Hmm.
But I always wanted to go, and he said if I I think I had to pay for my ticket and use vacation time. I had to pay for my flight and use vacation time, and he would get me a badge, and I think he got my room. I forget how that worked, but and then I just went to experience it. And that's
Did
where I
it?
met Pete.
Oh, well, that's cool.
Was that year?
What was that? What was that interaction like?
Well, it was Pete was walking around with a box or two of Lanceros under his arm, and George Brightman was kind of like walking him around, making some introductions. It was his first show, it was my first show. I had I can't remember if I had met him once in New York before. I don't think I did. I guess it was there. But his nickname was Tattoo Pete, and George kept telling me about this young guy, Tattoo Pete, that I need to meet, and George was telling him about this young guy, Michael Davidoff, and we met, spent I don't know 10 minutes talking to each other in the aisles, and he gave me a cigar, and I lit it up, and it was like nothing I had ever tasted before. It
Banger,
was
huh?
great. It was really, really cool. But that show, I just remember walking in and seeing the scale of the industry in one room. And it was one of the most awesome feelings of just getting the sense of, okay, like everyone is here. Everyone is here. Every retailer that's important, every brand that's important, they're all here. And I don't know a soul. I'm an anonymous 23-year-old kid. You know, let's go, and just meeting retailers. And I was working for Davidoff obviously at the time, so I went to the Davidoff dinner that year, which was a black tie dinner. It might have been my first black tie dinner now that I think about it. Uh, it was an amazing time. And it was also in kind of a rut in the industry. It was, coming out of the cigar boom and really before that next crest.
Was the black tie dinner you said was your first potentially? Was that pretty surreal experience? Even though
Yeah,
you
it was on a riverboat, if I recall. Uh, and it was the precursor to what became the Golden Band Awards, where they did those award ceremonies. But yeah, man, I mean, all the Swiss were there, so it was, I was meeting all the top Davidoff brass, all the top Davidoff retailers in the country. It was a serious, serious event, especially as a young 23-year-old. I mean, you got to think you're with the A-list on your first trip.
Did the proprietors of Gloucester Street ever go to, well, I guess was RTDA back then, back when you started in the
That
industry?
was RTDA, yeah. Yeah. I don't remember if Joe went, he was the owner. Jose went, who was the manager. Um, Paul became he managed it at one point. He used to go. It was a must, it was a must attend.
That's awesome. That's awesome. We talked a lot about media coverage, in the previous series of questions, but I was interested to learn, and I don't think we've ever talked about this before, Michael, but you had a brief stint in media too. You were a contributing writer for Hot Living magazine, in the, I guess, the mid 2000s.
I wrote for
How did that come pass?
I wrote for a lot. I wrote for Smoke Magazine. I wrote for Cigar Report, Rob Report, um, Hot Living, Worth, bunch of stuff. A lot of the writing, some of the writing gigs I got on my own, but a lot of them was through a guy named Aaron Sigmund, who's probably most famous at the moment for writing the Big Fuente book um, that a lot of people have seen. But Aaron was an original founder of Smoke Magazine, if I recall, and so people were coming to him for writing gigs, and I was looking for other opportunities to make some money and get my name out. And so he was gracious enough to give me a couple leads.
Did you find yourself have an affinity for writing, or is it just, as you said, some another avenue potentially to, you
No,
know?
I have an affinity for storytelling.
Mhm.
And so the way I wrote was, I used to do all our newsletters, all the Davidoff newsletters back in the day that would go out for ecom. Yeah, I used to send monthly emails to my client list with new products and descriptions and a rather long form communication I would do on a regular basis. But I like to tell stories in unconventional ways that I think will resonate the most with people. So I haven't done it much lately, although I did actually just write a piece for a new magazine out of Florida called Lux Wellington. And I just wrote a piece for them about the cigar industry.
Nice.
But yeah, I mean, I don't have the time to do it the way I did, but yeah, I really enjoyed doing it. And it was great to see my name on a masthead.
Was it like you said, you have an affinity for storytelling? Was it just a was it a did you find it difficult compared to like the spoken word, or was it freeing in a different way because it was just different? It was a different avenue.
I think if you read my writing, it it reads very spoken word.
I'd agree
Like
with that. I read some of the pieces from Hot Living, so
yeah, I generally write the way I speak. And I'll typically, whatever I'm writing, I will write start to finish in one thought line, and then I'll tweak it as and make it, more sensible. But I think my voice is my voice, whether you watch this or whether you read it. It's
mhm.
some people I've few people have said that when they read my writing, they can hear me saying it.
No, I would absolutely agree with that. No, what I was going to give some compliment to Haute Living for it was that was a really good, and they must have had a really good editor at the time, because I definitely felt like it was your voice, and editors have a tendency to kind of strip
Well,
the
the whole
voice out of
living
people.
stuff was basically a blog, so there was no editor. I uploaded it myself.
Oh, okay. Well, that explains it. Okay.
Yeah. So I had a very shitty editor. It was me.
I thought they were really good pieces, and I think you have that's going to be kind of what I was going to be talking here tonight. I think you have a very like you said, an affinity for storytelling, but I think you have a very special knack for writing, and I was hoping that you could find some more opportunity to do that. I hope you do, because it's I think it's a not necessarily a hidden talent, but I think it's a strong talent of yours.
I'd like to do more of it. There's it becomes, it's one more thing to focus my time on, and I find myself with less and less time, and I much prefer to use some of the extra time focused on my two little ones and my wife and my family. So writing and drumming all kind of take a back seat.
Do you spend much time still on the drums? Was it?
No, although actually, was it yesterday or today? We went up there for something, and my daughter said that she had snuck up there and was tapping out a rhythm that she wanted to play for me, and then so she played it, and then I sat and played a little bit,
Nice.
but not a lot.
Do they have a special interest in music like you,
No,
children?
but they're awfully good at it. They don't seem to love it the way I naturally loved it, but they are quite good at it.
It's got to be encouraging.
Yeah, it's great. Listen, as long as I think you don't have to want to do it, but to be able to learn how to make music, I think is such a gift when you can play a melody or play something that is musical. There's something there's something almost divine about it. And so I think I hope everyone has the opportunity to play an instrument at some point in their life and know what it's like to create something that is melodic.
I played music in my younger life. I was never very good at it. Didn't love it either. I played the cello. My sister played cello. She was wonderful at it. Um, as she's wonderful at most things that she applies herself because she applies herself incredibly well to everything that she wants to do, which is why she's successful at what she does. She's a registrar actually at the Whitney Museum there in New York. So, um, and it's um, she's incredibly good at it. She had the opportunity to work for the Met there in New York for a while as well. Dallas Museum of Art. She's incredibly accomplished, and um, but music was something that I never found I love for it. And even to this day I'm not a terribly good consumer. I've said this before on the show. I'm not a terribly good consumer of music. I like what I like. It's very eclectic, which is very definitely follows me everywhere I go. I'm very I smoke everything. I eat everything. I'll drink anything. And I just genuinely enjoy a lot of things. Um which is a blessing and a curse,
Yeah,
in its
but
own
I
way.
think when you know what it takes to play it, you can you listen to music. Anything we listen to, we apply imagination to the other things that we don't, to the other senses that we can't experience at the time. So I think there's an ability to listen to music and see it played, imagine it played in your head. And but when you have actually played it, it gives a different perspective to the way you listen to music because you know what it takes to play it. Whether you have an affinity for it or not doesn't make a difference. It gives you a slight personal experience with it that I think allows you to appreciate it differently than if you've never played music before, which is the same for cigars, frankly.
Oh, absolutely. So, going from that first trade show where you met Pete Johnson and were kind of like, again, you were newcomer to the industry in some ways, not necessarily entirely.
Well,
Um,
I was brand new to industry. I wasn't new to my job, but if that was my introduction to industry, other retailers, that's pretty new.
mhm.
That was a debut on the scene.
What was what was probably the biggest surprise for you when you walked into that trade? Just the
How
scale when
big
you
the
got
industry was. Yeah.
just the scale of it. Yeah. I don't think I think if that the my first trade show of 2018 would have been I mean I was still very much in awe and it was very very special to me. I don't want to I'll never take away from that. But I think the scale would have been far more impressive to me if I hadn't attended my first trade show earlier that year for my day job. Um which was I work as a software salesman in the I worked as a software salesman in the green industry lawn care, landscaping, irrigation, etc. And that industry is, for one, is fucking massive. And their trade show every year is what's called the Equip Expo in Louisville, Kentucky, which is the largest convention center in the entire country. And they filled that thing to the brim and the outside as well. And it's just massive. Does not begin to describe it. But the scale of, I mean, the cigar industry obviously is considerably smaller, and it's definitely was definitely a sight to behold. My
I
first
had
trade
been
show.
I had been to when I was at Berkeley in Boston, I would go as a student representative to the Percussive Arts Society, which is it's basically it's the drumming and percussion trade show.
Is that Nom?
No, NAM is National Association Music something. That's like all music industry. This one was specifically drums. Uh, and so I'd been to trade shows and sort of had that experience. And being with Berkeley was kind of like being with Davidoff. I mean, it definitely got me seats at tables that I had no business being at, other than I was with the chair of the percussion department at Berkeley, and I was already in the cigar business, so I would show up loaded with cigars, and turns out a lot of the big drumming execs are also cigar guys, so that helped quite a bit. But I had seen trade shows, experienced trade shows, but I guess I didn't imagine the cigar industry was as big. I pictured like a gift show with 10-foot booths. I did not envision these structures of
Right.
booths that you walk in and engage the way we do.
Cigar City, the city of
Right.
cigars. Yeah. Some were like cathedrals. It was crazy. The with that trade show, was it? I mean, I well, to kind of just go into your yeah, I guess your musical tendencies. Like what I think I may have asked this before, Michael, and I apologize, but what kind of do you play Pearl? Do
Pearl,
you play Pearl? Okay, and then Siljan,
Sabian.
Sabian symbols. Is there? I mean, those are the big two. I mean, Siljan and Sabian, right? I mean, there's not really a third. If there is, it's a distant one.
Symbol wise,
Yeah, symbols.
dude, I'm so out of the scene. I couldn't tell you. I mean, there are lots of cymbal companies that I remember as a young drummer thinking were uh BS that I now see, serious endorsers playing. So the industry's obviously changed a lot, but I'm a dinosaur in that world. So for me, I'm fiercely loyal. So I'm Pearl and Sabian. Plus I haven't bought a new piece of equipment in 20 years.
um, was did you? This is a question that I always had, and I never asked you. Did you have your Was the kit supplied by Berkeley School of Music, or did you take your own kit to school? Like, how did that
No,
work?
I took it.
Okay, so you played Pearl all the way back to like.
My first drum set was Pearl that
Mhm.
my parents bought me for Christmas in fifth grade. It was a big, massive, it was right before the export series. I think it was called the World Series. And and then I wanted nicer, smaller jazz kit, and my parents said, "We bought you the first one, you can buy the second." And so I asked for money for every holiday from every family member, and I worked as soon as I could get a job, I got a job. And then I bought my dream kit. Uh, I think I bought it the summer before my senior year in high school. Might have been before my junior year. I don't remember, but it was six pieces, all the double braced hardware. And then I remember I played my first gig, and it took me like 2 hours to lug that kit all the way down, take it apart, put it in my car, drive it to the gig, take it out, set it up. And I don't think I ever played six pieces again. It was it was like way too much drums to be traveling around. And so I trimmed it down a bit. But yeah, that's the kit. That's the kit I play now.
Oh, so
Everything
you
I've ever
still have it?
recorded is on that drum set.
Well, that's awesome.
Yep.
So fast forward to your first trade show as Ferio Tego, just a couple of years ago. First of all, like we were talking about coverage in the mainstream area, and you said like you'd kind of already talked about it a little bit, so I don't want to go repeat ourselves too much here. But you've been featured twice in Maximum magazine. I mean, that's a pretty big that's a pretty big deal. I mean,
We got two Maxims and a Sports Illustrated in the first 2 years.
man, I don't know how I missed this. And that's on me, Michael. That really is. I don't know how I missed that.
I don't know
Because
why
it's
you don't wake up every morning and Google Ferio Tego and see what's happening.
I know that's
I mean,
the
that's totally
again
on you.
that's on
That's what
me.
I do
So
every morning.
I bet there's some interesting stuff that pops up. But it was for me, even though if in a lot of ways it can almost be ancient history, especially as fast as the industry moves for you. I mean, it was really encouraging to see those as I was kind of preparing for tonight. And again, I don't know how I missed it in the past and everything, but the um I mean, and even with those those two recognitions, but I mean, those are two very powerful publications. I mean, you just don't see, I mean, obviously cover stories are out of the question, like you said, no chance. But I mean, you don't see other publications kind of dabbling in a similar vein, like
I
lifestyle
hope
segments and
so.
stuff.
I hope so. I think there's a lot of really unique stories within the cigar industry that other media should cover. The small business publications, entrepreneur publications, food and wine, and finding ways to incorporate cigars into it. I just think the risk is too great.
Mm. Going to that trade show as Ferio Tego, we've talked about it several times, so I don't want to retrace it too much. But is there a story from that trade show specifically that maybe you haven't talked about as much or haven't shared before that kind of stands out as like that was a key moment in the early history of the brand?
The first trade show, the first PCA trade show, we had our own location, because that was the first post um, pandemic show. We had our own setup and we had no product. So, as great as that experience was, just to tell stories and reconnect with people and just get a sense for what the initial vibe was towards Ferio Tego. The more important show was the second show because that was the first show that we actually had product to sell and we had sales. And the thing that just always resonates with me about that show was I remember very distinctly, very vividly opening up a box of Timeless and taking the top row of cigars out and taking the cellophane off and putting them back in place to put in the display, which is something I had done for 10 years. Open up a box of Timeless, take the top row out, take the cellophane out. But as I was doing it, it was a very unique kind of uh, it was a different sense of reality because I had always done it as an employee, and this was the first time doing it as the owner. And so being able to put those cigars out and then look at that secondary band that said Ferio Tego on it
Mm.
and not what it had said prior, and then seeing the Ferio Tego logo up on this tower, it was a real affirmation that Ferio Tego was a real brand, that I was a small business owner, which is the bedrock of our industry is small family businesses, and we were there with cigars out and customers ready to come and do business. It was a feeling that one of my proudest moments.
We to bring something about full circle here, I mentioned your conversation with Mike Stevankevich, and his release this year was the new size of his Pastania, Connecticut, which is called the Justice, which is named for his son. And there's a pretty cool story behind that. So, I mentioned how family is very important to him, as it is to you. We don't go a conversation with you talking about your daughters and your wonderful wife, and so I know family is very important to you. And Ferio Tego is a symbol of that.
Yeah.
Obviously, both literally and I would say figuratively too. Do you see a time and place where maybe something similar, your family is continued to pay continue to pay homage to your family, maybe with a naming of a cigar or a size or something like that? Do you see that in the future of Ferio Tego at all?
Again, I have to go back to what's authentic. The, Ferio Tego is a unique story, although it obviously the origins are a Herklots story, but the Ferio Tego story as a business and a brand is a two-family story. It's the Herklots family and the Scott family. And it deliberately does not say Herklots, it's Ferio Tego. So I don't think that plays into what's authentic to us, at least today. But I don't know what the future is going to be as far as names or projects or what we do. I know that what we have lined up, there's nothing specific in that area.
Okay. Okay. Well, Michael, I really appreciate tonight's conversation. We just have a few more questions before we wrap up the evening. So we've kind of we're going to go into our, like I said, like I call them, our fun segments and everything. No more presidential trivia though. So you're good
Oh,
there.
thank God.
You're safe. But we are going to have a little fun with some of our segments. So this, without further ado, that takes us into our Everybody Eats segment, which is brought to you by Pastania Cigars. If you always make sure that your serving style is bigger than your appetite, everybody will always get theirs. Pastania Cigars is more than great cigars made by cool people. They embody an attitude of gratitude and grit. With Pastania, everybody eats. Now, Michael, you had the opportunity to be on the show before where I asked a food question, and this is food related, but I'm going to take a spin off of this because, again, I found this incredibly entertaining. You'll be able to see the interview in its entirety very shortly on Cigar Coop, part of the Cigar Coop Coalition's coverage of PCA 2024. But you had the opportunity to speak with Trip Waldrop of Let's Get Pairing. And at the end, the conclusion of your interview, you had the opportunity to sample a unusual treat that Dennis Fang brought to the trade show to pair with cigars, some Norwegian double salted black licorice. And that was a pretty unique experience for you. Why don't you talk a little bit about that?
No good. It was not good.
You spit it out.
It didn't taste good. It didn't feel good. There was nothing good about it. It
Strong,
was not good.
wasn't it? Yeah, I mean, it was.
I love licorice. I love black licorice. I love everything about it. There was nothing about that I loved at all. It wasn't redeeming. It was unpalatable. And it reminded me of doing component tastings and smoking like straight Costa Rica or straight Peru or just one of those things that's just so unpalatable by itself. That was really awful. I'm glad I did it, and I will never do it again.
You're a great sport, Michael. I have to give it to you. Yeah, I had some as well, and I not mistakenly, but I love black licorice as well, and I bit into one. I had taken about 3 or 4 pieces out of the bag. I had bit into one, and I was chewing it, and I was like, "Oh, okay." And it just got stronger and stronger with every single chew. I mean, you didn't even make it as far as I did, I think, into my first bite. But I was like, I definitely put a couple of the pieces back because I mean, it was
I actually
very,
completely
very
forgot. Well, maybe I got the one that you put back. I mean, maybe I had a little
a little pear on it too.
ELOSOFUMAR finger schmutz on there. I don't know, but man, that was tough to get through.
I promise I washed my hands, but yeah,
I
it was
completely
tough.
forgot about that. I can't wait to see the video.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun. So that brought an interesting question. Have we talked about your connection with Emerald Delmonico, of course, and the great eating experiences you had at this year's trade show and many trade shows for that matter. So I know food is something that's very important to you, but have you ever sat down at a meal and had a similar experience where whatever was put in front of you was just unpalatable and just didn't agree with you to maybe not to the extent where you spit it out, but it was definitely you did not definitely not complete the bite.
Yes, but my favorite story is actually an Emerald story. Um, and it's been long enough now where it wouldn't even make a difference. We were in Newport, Rhode Island, doing a fundraiser for Johnson and Wales. And uh, it was the night before, and there was like kind of this tasting, and all the culinary students had all like prepared these different stations, and you walked around, and Emerald had a camera crew there, and we had set up a cigar bar outside. And so Emerald came out and he was like, Herky, come on, roll with me. We're gonna go do a tasting. So I was like, okay. So we're rolling through, and they mic'd me up and they're filming, and it was just the two of us kind of walking station to station, talking about, I was like almost half interviewing him, but I guess someone was supposed to do it with him and they couldn't show up, and so he grabbed me and we're doing this walk and talk. And it was not live, so it was obviously going to be edited later. And so we're making our way one through the other, and we get to like this gumbo station, and we're like, "Oh, you taste that? Oh, this, the corn, whatever. Oh, yeah, it's great." Blah blah blah. And then he's like, "Oh, oysters." And we go over to the raw bar, and he grabs an oyster, and he's like, "Oh, these are whatever oyster it is." And I'm like, "Oh, great." And, and he slugs it back, and within like, I mean, it was like 2 seconds. He slugs it back and just goes, and just hawks this oyster out of his mouth. And he's like, not that one. Not that one. That oyster would fucking kill somebody. And then we just kept rolling. But it was so funny to me that he was so smooth, but just like hoisted this oyster out of his mouth that rocket fired. But then he didn't flinch and just kept going to the next one. I couldn't pull it together because I was laughing so hard that we had to cut because I couldn't pull it together fast enough to get back into character and continue because I'd never seen. I mean, here's the most distinguished, prized, you know, TV chef of all time, and he hawked the oyster out of his mouth. It was so funny. Needless to say, I did not have mine, and I think they pulled the oysters for the night, but it was hysterical.
That's funny. Oh man, God, I can't imagine what that had been like in real in real
There's actually
time.
another one. We were with Emerald, funny enough. We used to do these events in Hawaii. We were having dinner in Hawaii, and it was before the big kickoff. So it was just my wife and I, Emerald and his wife, and Fred Schrader and his wife, and we're having dinner. And it was this restaurant that was kind of like fusiony, um, Asian, Hawaiian stuff. And we might have had a little too much sun and a little too much wine. And Emerald's Emerald had the bottom of the rice, so it was kind of like overcooked, and there were some really hard rice kernels, whatever you call them. So as we're eating and drinking and having this lovely night with our three couples, Emerald kept spitting uh rice at me like bullets because they were so hard. He was afraid he was going to crack a tooth, and so every time he got to a hard one, he just and I kept getting hit, and I'm like, what is this? And then he starts laughing hysterically, and he was spitting this unedible
Rice at you.
in my face. Yeah.
Oh man, that's awesome. Well,
But I have not had the same violent response to food. Not yet, anyway.
that's good. That's good. Well, that was our Everybody Eats segment sponsored by Fustania Cigars. If you always make sure that your serving style is bigger than your appetite, everybody will always get theirs. Pastani Cigars is more than just great cigars made by cool people. They embody an attitude of gratitude and grit. With Pastania, everybody eats. So that moves us to our asylum moment. Michael, you've had the opportunity to be a part of the segment a few times, so I had a different spin tonight. Our segment is brought to you by Asylum Cigars. Refuge is more than just a physical place, it can be a state of mind. Some of life's greatest reflections can be found in our own personal asylum. Moments like these were made for Asylum Cigars. Light up an asylum and choose your refuge. Now, Michael, the first time you had took part in this segment, you told us the story, which I love, which was your first, maybe your only interaction with James Gandolfini. It was after an event, and you shared inadvertently shared a cigar with James Gandolfini.
Yep.
So, which he, obviously, and I know you didn't mind because it made for a great story where you basically were your asylum moment was interrupted by James Gandolfini. So my question tonight about this was: have you ever had another moment? Have you ever had another moment? Maybe not anyone, maybe necessarily as famous or infamous, but have you ever had another moment of solitude that was interrupted, and who was that by, and what were you smoking, if you can remember?
I mean, Gandolfini was a good one. A moment of solace interrupted. It's probably, I mean, the ones that come to mind now are, uh, I enjoy cigars everywhere, but typically moments where I think I can enjoy them without disturbing other people. You don't want to. I'm not one of these guys that believes that my right to enjoy a cigar is greater than your right to not have to smell it. So try to find places where it's appropriate. And I'm grateful that I've got a good crew of buddies where I live that also enjoy cigars, but our kids are also friends. And so it's often where we will get together with our families and then dads will escape and fire up and enjoy a cigar. And then inevitably that becomes the room where all the kids want to come hang out and kick the door open and complain about how it smells. And it's so that's probably my post fatherhood asylum moment is just when you think you find that one little spot where you can carve out, escape, everyone's happy, the wives are chatting, the kids are playing, the dads have their moment to cut and light and enjoy, and in burst the kids ready to completely disrupt.
Cause chaos like they do.
That's it. But you know
Uh,
what? No different than Gandolfini interrupting. It's worth it.
Absolutely. So that begs this kind of opens up the door to begs the question a little bit. So, Michael, you're pretty famous in our industry. You're a very well known personality. The brand story is one of well known. Your story is well known at this point. So when you're hanging out with fellow soccer dads, are you Michael from down the block, or do you is it still are you still very much the infamous personality that we all know? I mean, because you've rubbed some shoulders with very impressive people over the years. I mean, we mentioned Emeril Lagasse, James Gandolfini. I mean, there's numerous stories where your pandemic series of interviews comes to mind
Yeah,
too, with people that you just, I mean, you've kind of spanned the breadth of industries and personalities of the like. I mean, you know, um, are you just another soccer dad on the block, or
I
do they
think
know who
so.
you are?
I don't know. I mean, um, for the guys, for people who I don't know how to answer that question.
Okay.
I I think for people who know what I do, they think it's interesting. There's some that follow me on social media, and so they track a little more of the detail of what I do and who I do it with. But for the most part, we're it's so easy when you're in our business, it's such a small pond
Hmm.
that the big fish, small pond scenario is certainly true here. Um, but when you get outside into the real world, I don't think anyone actually understands that you can make a living
Hmm.
making selling cigars. It's where we are, everyone's in finance or they have, big jobs and everything is corporate and um so, yeah, I'm just another dad cheering on kids.
That's
But
awesome.
I'm also the dad that does have cigars in their
That has
pocket.
cigars,
So
yeah.
so for the ones who do know, they think it's cool. And we always support, a lot of these local fundraisers and things will donate, cigar nights and other things. And so as more and more of the dads get exposed to that, then it's kind of like a little light bulb, like, oh wow, this is pretty cool. And then if they do any research, then they might realize, okay, this guy's been around for a while. But I the introductions these days are I'm their father. I'm I don't even
Right.
know if I say my name half the time. I more just reference my kids and their
Yeah.
and their grades and their teachers, and that's how we maintain our social relevance.
I'm so and so's dad. Yeah. I think it's interesting how what I love about cigars is I've known in every circle that I've entered in, I'm known as the cigar guy. Every place I've worked and everything. In fact, I just started a new job in February, and I very much quickly have garnered that reputation in the most surreal moment that I think is hilarious, and I don't say it to toot my own horn. It's very very surreal and very bizarre for me. So my new job sends me to a conference in my first week of employment. So I worked for 4 days, did kind of orientation stuff, and then they flew me to Puerto Rico to be part of an association's conference. So this is a small association in the pest control world. And I was there as a representative of the software that I now work for, and was there to build some relationships and stuff. And this kid comes up to me. I say kid, but everyone's a kid to me now because I'm older. But this young man comes up to me, says, "Hey, I hear you have cigars." And I mean, I don't know anyone there, Michael. I don't know anybody. I don't know anybody at all. I barely have made a few introductions myself and shared my name. I have a name tag on, and and I said, well, as a point of fact, I do have cigars. I said, would you like some? And he said, yeah, that would be great. Do you think we could hang out tonight and smoke cigars? I said, absolutely, we can definitely do that. And I was just curious. I was like, how did you? Because again, I don't know anybody, and I certainly had not shared with anyone that I had cigars. I wasn't wearing any cigar paraphernalia. I
Right.
didn't
They
have
weren't like stuffed in your
yeah,
pocket.
they weren't stuffed in my pocket or anything. Which is unusual for me. But I mean, I didn't know, again, I didn't know anyone and I didn't want to rub anyone the wrong way necessarily. So, um, and he said, yeah, so and so from this company told me about you. And I was like, I don't know that person. I heard it of the company, but that was just because it was on a list of attendees and everything like that. So I recognized the name in that sense. But um, he's like, yeah, he told me that you're a cigar guy. And I was like, oh, oh, okay. And I didn't ever talk to I didn't talk to that individual for another day or so. And I finally made my way over to him at a reception, and I said, hey, so and so came up to me and talked to me about cigars. He said you told him about it. He's like, yeah, yeah. And I said, how did you know? And he's like, well, Bear, I watch your show.
That's great.
And I was like, are you fucking kidding me?
It's great, man.
I mean, it was the most random, surreal thing.
Well,
It,
I mean, that's the
it,
whole
things.
cigar famous is not real famous, right?
Mhm.
When you're recognized within your field, you can I mean, famous isn't even the right word, but recognized or
Mhm.
recognizable. And so that will happen from time to time here or in other places every once in a while. I was thinking of the asylum bit as disrupting a moment of solace with a cigar.
Yeah.
But there have been moments, whether here socially where we've been out and someone has come over and said, "Hey, aren't you Michael? I follow you. I know your cigars." And so where cigar people will recognize me in
Mhm.
random places. In fact, we were driving. I think we were driving to Buffalo and we stopped at a rest stop, and on our way in the parking lot, those big highway rest stops, walking in, someone yelled, "Herklots." And I looked over and I didn't see anyone I recognized. And there were two or three guys just standing there. And they were like, we love your blends. And I was like, "Oh, thanks, man." And we were walking, and my oldest was like, "Who is that?" I was like, I don't
I have
know.
no idea.
No idea. But that was a cool moment, I think, for them to to see, that people do recognize me and recognize the work.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think and I've tried to explain to some people like my family, for instance, and loved ones that like in very short time, because I still consider myself a new person to this business, to the industry itself. I certainly haven't been around as long as you, and
Dude, I'm still a new guy and it's
and
25 years.
that was my point. That's what I was just about to say. At 25 years is a long time, but in the scope of things, in the scale of things, it's relatively short. But I can walk onto the trade show floor, and I mean, there are hardly any booths where I don't know anybody. And when I'm talking about to family and stuff, I'm like, oh yeah. And they're like, oh, well, what about this cigar? I'm like, well, yeah. And then Michael did this. This is his story and blah 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 blah. And they're like, wait, you know? And I was like, oh yeah, I know him. Like yeah. I'm like, we have text message conversations, and we know each other, and oh, I know this person, and they do this, and it's almost kind of overwhelming to people to kind of hear that they're like, how do you have these? I'm like, it's a very small industry, and I think the grandness of it is is wonderful, because it's very otherworldly. The premium cigar industry is, and it has this kind of this aura about it. But it's very small, and
It's very small and it's intimate. There's a level of affection within the industry that I don't think exists in other industries the way it exists in ours. And and that's an awfully special thing to be a part of, man.
mm-hmm,
And
1,000%.
and to 25 years in, and it still feels new, and I still feel like I have so much to prove and so much to learn. It's I'm encouraged by seeing how many people continue to enter the business and approach it with a sense of reverence and an openness to learn. And while I certainly appreciate the desire to disrupt and to innovate and to do things differently, which our industry needs and always has, there's a balance in a traditional industry like ours, in an intimate community like ours, that I think you see the people who get it really become embraced,
Mm-hmm.
and that mutual admiration and respect is really what continues to advance the ball of our industry, is exactly that. And you can see the difference between people who enter the industry for um, the sincerest reasons and those who enter it for maybe just personal advancement or for uh, commercial success. They tend not to reach that level of success, or if they do, they tend not to stay there.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, my I'm very fortunate that I had great parents and incredible role models, and the influences in my life when I was young were instrumental in making me the person I am today, because I lead with a general sense of gratitude first. I'm very thankful for the people who have given me opportunities, and and were willing to give me their time and willing to teach. I'm very fortunate to have 25 years in at 43 years old.
Yeah. I think that's kind of that is the approach that I've kind of taken, is that, like, again, with myself considering myself a newbie a lot of ways, is that but here I am 286 episodes into the show, and I feel like I still have light years to learn, light years to go. But I try to attach myself to good people.
That's it, man. That's it. You have to surround yourself with good people, and you have to be your reason to be, I believe, has to be more than just self-serving. It has to be broader. It has to be for the greater good of more than just yourself and your company and your brand. Obviously, I want Ferio Tego is my number one priority, as is my family. But I want the industry to be better. If the industry's better, Ferio Tego's better, which is why I'm on the board and why I do all the other things. It's just, you know, uh, if you can think broader and you can think more inclusively about trying to find ways where everybody can be better and do better, you will be better and do better too.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, that kind of brought a reminder of one of the featured people that was in the documentary that was a part of the seminar at PCA, which was a person that I've heard referred to, and I definitely smoked some of his cigars early on in my smoking career, but his name is usually mentioned with reverence in terms of like what could have been, and it was Tony Burhani, Bahia Cigars, it was to finally put a face to that name, and when he was kind of, some of his words were featured in the documentary and everything. That's I I often think like what could have been, because I mean, he's hardly ever mentioned without some kind of reverence to him. Like he was on fire, in a lot of ways, and I mean he was.
Bro, he was as big as it gets. I mean, he had security with him because he needed it, not because, he wanted some kind of fancy entourage. It was it was a spectacle. He was a beast. He's one of my early influences um, as a brand that moved me, but he was incredible. But
Yeah,
these things happen.
but life kind of gets in the way sometimes. But it's
I don't
but
know enough about his story at the end to understand why he's not in the business now. Um, I just the people who are still here, 25 years for me, 50 years for Casada, you look at the generational advancement like Plasencia, these are people who are really they're contributing beyond their own brands. They're
mhm,
contributing to something greater. Quesada, founding member of Pro Cigar. Plasencia, profoundly innovative in the way they grow and make cigars for every major brand that exists. They've
mhm.
made cigars for them. These are companies that are thinking of something greater than just their brand and embrace the fact that rising tide lifts all ships. And I hope we can do that too.
Absolutely. Well, that Michael, that leads us into our last question of the evening, which is
Wait, I got
always
one. How
sure.
was your Generoso? Because I'm almost at the end of this
Yeah, I
Elegancia.
mean, it absolutely fantastic. This is the best, and I'm not just saying this because I'm talking to you, Michael. This is the best Generoso that I've had. Age has been incredibly kind to this. It's got I still stand by it. I think it's gotten bolder. The retro hail is incredibly exquisite. The baking spices are really rich and vibrant to it. It's incredibly well balanced. It's incredibly hearty.
Good.
Where I would have characterized this very early on in the first time that I smoked it was very much a more medium bodied cigar, full flavored, but medium bodied. It's definitely morphed into a more of a fuller bodied state. And I've smoked cigars today, so this isn't like it's my first rodeo or
Good.
anything. But it's sensational, and it pairs incredibly well with the rye. I've moved on some bourbon, still sipping on a little bit of coffee, and it's just tremendous. It's tremendous. You,
Awesome.
you said you've been smoking them too. This particular vintage. I mean, has that been your experience as well, or?
Yeah. I think the original thesis is proving to be true. And so I'm excited now as all these releases start to age and get some time on them. I can't wait to start doing vertical tastings and, library tastings. I'm really pumped about it. And I can't tell you the last time I smoked a cigar this low. This is Elegancia, and it's everything I want it to be.
Yeah, I was thinking earlier about changing, but no, I'm just enjoying it so much. I mean, I'm still got plenty of cigar left, and I'm gonna probably smoke it down as far as you did, and it's yeah, I mean, I can't wait for 2024 to come out so that I can, like you said, make a point of doing some kind of a vertical aging experiment, which will be great. So, all right. Well, that will lead us into our last question, the Dunbarton Tobacco and Trust curveball segment. Fastballs or curveballs, it doesn't matter. Since the company's inception, Steve Saka has been knocking them out of the park. Count them up, everybody. That's 9 consecutive years in the consensus top 3. Congratulations to our good friend, Mr. Steve Saka. So this is a 2-parter, Michael. I thought this would be interesting, a little bit of a curveball to history. So let's just say, for the sake of argument, that Altria had kept Nat Sherman until this year, 2024. And what happened in the past now took place this year, where they decided to close stores. Is there a Ferio Tego? And if there is, does it look any different than it has in the past few years?
They kept it, but I left, or I was still with them.
They kept it and you stayed with them. Same thing.
So, um,
So everything stayed the same except for the years.
I would assume that the ensuing reaction effect would be the same. That I would explore options. I wouldn't find any particularly viable ones. I'd consult with my closest friends and confidants in the business, my peers, who would all tell me something similar. That is, now's your time to do your own thing, and I probably would have done it. I'm awfully glad it happened when it did, because making that decision at 40 is very different than making that decision at 43. But I would bet that it would have netted out the same.
So Ferio Tego doesn't look any different. The same kind of mantra. Everything exists in its place. You think?
I mean, it's an impossible question to answer, because who knows? I mean, it's
Right.
all.
That's what makes it a curveball.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm assuming, we were very thoughtful and deliberate in our approach, particularly around acquiring timeless and metropolitan brands and restoring them to market. What I couldn't guess is what would have happened with those brands with another 3 years under Altria. I mean, there were a lot of restrictions with our ability to advertise and market and really participate the way other cigar companies do, just because of the nature of their company and their compliance and regulatory restrictions. So even though we were growing all the way up and until we closed, I don't know if those restrictions would have made our growth possible.
Mhm.
And so who knows if 6 years under that regime would have rendered Timeless or Metropolitan less relevant and then potentially less valuable to me to want to try and resurrect it if
Mhm.
if that would have been the case. But assuming we continued on that trajectory, then I assume that I would have made the same decisions.
So you kind of assumed part of my question there. So here's the second part of it. Let's assume you had left for doesn't matter the reason, right? This is just curveball segment. So you had left, so but Altria had continued with Nat Sherman up until this year. Ferio Tego has been established for a couple of years now. You've done whatever you've done to this point. Ferio Tego, for example, obviously, the annual release, and you probably would have created some other releases to go, maybe Suma, for example, to go around it or something like that. And they closed doors like they did, but they do it this year. Do you think you and Brendan would have had conversation with acquiring the brands like you did, like when you did?
I think we definitely would have had the conversations, but I'm not sure if I would have held the same, um, I don't know. Part of the momentum to acquire those brands was to was to be able to author the work and to be able to continue to preserve that work the way I created it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so a different scenario would be, don't forget, before we closed and before pandemic, we were trying to sell.
Correct.
And so if the sale had taken place and I didn't go along, so let's say that was the point of sever, is the the company was sold, I wasn't kept as part of that deal, and so I had to go find something else, but the brands lived on under different ownership. Um, that's a more likely hypothetical.
Mm-hmm.
Ferio Tego definitely would have happened as a result of the process of exploring options and then being driven to do my own thing. I don't know if I would have had the same passion and enthusiasm to reclaim it 3 years apart. You
Mm-hmm.
know, if I'm away from it from 3 years, I my gut says that emotionally I would have detached myself and stayed focused on Ferio. But I don't know.
Yeah,
I'm really glad that that's curveball and hypothetical, and I'm really glad that it all worked the way it did.
I think it worked out perfectly, Michael. I mean, and I think most people would agree. And if they
You
don't
know,
agree, they're wrong, but that's fine.
when when life throws you a curveball, it is very easy to become paralyzed in trying to understand the why.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and approach that negatively, saying, why is this bad thing happening to me? But approaching it positively, saying, why is this opportunity existing for me, was everything in Ferio Tego. And creating the company, doing it with Brendan, engaging with Altria to buy those brands, engaging with the factories to keep the work there. Uh, in hindsight, there was some real divine intervention, and I can't pretend that I understand whatever God's plan is for me. What I can say is an open mind and a lot of thought and prayer and conversations have led us to what this is today. And I'm awfully grateful.
Well, on that note, that will conclude our time tonight. Michael, thank you so much, as always,
Thank
for the
you.
incredible conversation. I look forward to having you on the show all the time, every time that you've graced us, and especially with the short turnaround this year. I know you've been incredibly busy, as you always are, but you always make time for me, and it definitely does not go unappreciated or unnoticed, and so is with a grateful heart that I thank you, as always. So thank you very
Likewise.
much.
I appreciate you, man. And thank you to everyone watching us.
Yes, absolutely. So if you are catching us on YouTube, be sure to hit the subscribe button. If you're catching us on Facebook Live, we are broadcasting every Sunday from starting at 9:30 Central. We have a great slate of guests coming up, including a first appearance here in a couple weeks from Tim Osgenner of Oz Family Cigars.
Great dude.
Speaking of great stories, we're looking forward to that one. We're gonna have some fun on that show as well, so stay tuned for all that. And as well as dates, and but the time is always the same, 9:30 Central every Sunday night. You can catch us here on Facebook Live. If you're listening to us wherever you listen to podcasts, whether that be on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Podbean, or iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to podcasts, be sure you download, subscribe, and review. If you already are a subscriber, be sure to hit unsubscribe, but don't forget to hit resubscribe, because that helps my numbers. That's the only reason Michael continues to agree to come on. Just kidding. It's not the only reason. It's just the reason I make up in my head. But our audio broadcast is always brought to you by Gran Habano Cigars. Honest, compassionate, great cigars. Be sure to download, subscribe, and review today. And with that, our 286th take is now at a close. We really do appreciate all those likes, shares, and comments. Keep them coming. So from everyone to everyone, it's with a grateful heart that I appreciate you and thank you for tuning in tonight. I'm Bear Duplessis, live from the Alec Bradley Lone Star Studios of Azle, Texas. He's Michael Herklots, everybody. Guess what? We'll see you next time.